The site manager drew a line through Breesha Corkill's name on the transport list and turned the clipboard round so she could read it. "You went up," he said. "You can find your own way down. 13 people were already on the minibus." Somebody wiped the condensation off the glass with a sleeve to see better. Somebody laughed. Nobody opened the door. She was 33 years old, a plus-size woman in a high-visibility jacket that had gone the color of the ground she worked on, and for 7 weeks she had been paid by the stump on that site. Ground work. Dragging brash, feeding the chipper, raking a lane that was going to be raked again tomorrow. That morning, she had put a rope in tree number 19 and gone up it without asking anybody, not to work. To put her hand flat on a wound in the bark and hold it there. She did not argue. She picked her bag up off the mud and held it against her. "Tell them not to park the pickup under 19, she said. "There's a limb up there with no wood left in it. First proper wind, and it's on the roof." The manager got on the bus. The doors folded shut. The bus went down Piper's Lane and turned left, and the sound of it thinned out into the rain. Mearswood was 13 miles from Wickstead. There was no path along that road, and no lighting on it, and no bus after 6. She sat down on the crash barrier with the bag on her knees and waited for the rain to make up its mind. Headlights came up the lane 20 minutes later and stopped level with her. A car door opened. A man came round the front of it and stood at the edge of the light with his hand out. "Don't cry," he said. "You're coming with me." "I'm not crying," she said. "It's raining." He kept the hand out. "Nobody left me," she said. "I was last, that's all." She had no idea that the man holding the car door open owned the land, the lane, the 30 lime trees standing on it, and a surname that people in 3 counties said quietly or did not say at all. At 7:30 the next morning, the Brandhoe yard stopped. It did not stop for a shout. Firmin Delvaux walked in through the vehicle gate with his coat over his arm, and the impact wrench in the corner wound down and did not start again. The kettle in the tea hut came to the boil, and nobody went for it. He was 43. The group owned the yard, the plant, the ground under the yard, and 1,100 acres between Wickstead and the coast, and it also owned the sort of history that made grown men check where their hands were. He had never once raised his voice on that site. He had never needed to. That was the whole of it. He put the transport list on the bonnet of the pickup face up where the line through her name was easy to see. "Whose writing is this?" he said. The site manager said it was his. "And the rule? Nobody climbs without an authorization. It's on the board. Read me the rest of the rule." The manager looked at the board and did not go over to it. Breesha was standing by the chipper with her gloves on. She had walked in from the far end of the lane, and she had been there since 6:10. "There's a limb hanging in 19, she said. "That's the thing that wants doing this morning. Everything else can wait." "Somebody will look at it," Delvaux said. "Sit down. I'm all right standing." He turned back to the yard. He asked who had been on the bus. He asked who had seen the list. He asked who had seen her sitting on the barrier as the bus went past, and the answers came out one at a time, plain, from people who could not think of a single advantage in lying. "I saw her. We all did. I thought somebody was going back for her." "Who did you think that was going to be?" Delvaux said, and nobody had an answer, and he did not make them find one. Aidan Johnson was in the yard that morning with a laptop bag on his shoulder. He surveyed the trees for the consultancy that had the group's contract. Delvaux asked him one question. "Number 19, when did you last have your hands on it?" Johnson said that the trees were on a rolling program. He said the last report went in before Christmas. He said the program was signed off. "That isn't what I asked you." Johnson said nothing at all, and the silence went on a beat too long, and everybody in the yard heard it go on. Not because they had decided to be brave that morning. Because a man was asking short questions in a level voice, and every one of them landed exactly where he put it. Before noon, the plant hire firm had taken every machine off Mearswood, 2 low loaders and a transit gone before lunch, and the hire manager rang the yard afterwards to say the site was clear and could not say who had instructed him. He said it twice, as though saying it again might produce the name. There was a number in the drawer of the yard office that was not on any letterhead. The foreman had been given it in 1998 by Delvaux's father, and told never to use it unless a man was under something. 5 people alive had it. 2 of the 5 were dead by the time he was shown where the drawer was, and nobody had ever crossed their names out. Delvaux drove her down Piper's Lane himself at noon, and stopped at number 19. He stood looking up into it with his hands in his pockets, and he could see a tree. "The report says root disease," he said. 6 years of reports, 30 trees, and every year there are fewer of them worth keeping. Give me your hand. He gave it to her, without asking why. She put his palm flat on the trunk of 19, held it there, then walked him 10 paces up the lane, and put it on the one next to it, and kept talking the whole time about the drainage in the field behind. One trunk was cold and slightly soft under the heel of his hand. The other was not. Neither of them mentioned it. Neither of them stopped talking about the drainage. "I apologize for last night," he said when he dropped her at the yard gate. "There is nothing about it I can defend, so I am not going to try." "It's a lane," she said. "People get left on worse. That is the part I would like to stop hearing." He said one more thing to the yard before he went, and he said it in the same voice he used for everything else. That a rule which only ever gets enforced against the person with the least insurance is not a rule. It is a habit, and that he had been paying for the habit for 6 years without reading the invoice. He was back in the lane at 10 that evening on his own with a torch. He walked the whole 30 and saw nothing at all, which was the first honest thing the trees had told him in 6 years. He went out again on the Sunday, and the Sunday after that. Not because he expected to find anything with a torch, because a woman on stump rates had put his hand on 2 trees without breaking off a sentence about drainage, and he had felt the difference, and he could not now stop feeling it. Knives Toffoli came to the yard on the Thursday to look at the compound. She was 47, and she ran the group's land, every acre, every lease, every planning file, and a consultancy contract that put a report on Delvaux's desk once a year, telling him that another few of his lime trees had given up. She looked at Breesha's boots, and then at Breesha. "I hear there was an incident with the transport." "There was." "Then I imagine it has been dealt with," she said, and she was already walking, and she did not look back at any point. She had not asked her name. She would not ask it for another 5 weeks. Delvaux found the purchase order that afternoon, and read it 3 times. Breesha Corkill was not on the payroll. She was not on the agency list either. She was a line on an order from a clearance contractor priced per stump, £11 a stump, and the order did not have her name on it. It had a quantity. "How is she paid?" he said. "By the stump," the yard foreman said. "By the stump. That's the order, sir." He put the order down and went out and found her behind the chipper with a rake. "You are paid by the stump." "I am." "How many stumps are there on a wet Thursday in February?" "Some Thursdays there aren't any," she said. "You clear round them, you burn the arisings, you rake the lane, and none of that has a stump in it. Then it comes to 5, and you've had a full day and it's worth nothing, so you find one that's been left from the autumn and you take that out as well. And on the days there are none at all. Then you do the day anyway," she said, "because the crew are doing it, and you can't be the one person standing about." He asked her whether she had ever raised it with anybody, raised it with who she said not unkindly, and went back to the rake because there was nobody to raise it with, and both of them knew that was the true answer, and not a complaint. The crew liked her, which he had noticed on the first morning, and had put down to her being new. It was not that. She took the heavy end of everything without making a performance of taking it. She fed the chipper at the pace of the slowest person on the rake and never once said that was what she was doing. When a lad of 19 cut into a stem badly and jammed the saw, she had the bar out and the chain back on before the foreman got across the yard, and she told the foreman it was her cut. It was not her cut. Everybody on the rake knew it was not her cut. There was a woman on the rake called Pella who had been on that yard 8 months and had never once been asked a question by anybody in an office. She said afterwards that watching Corkill come down a lane in her own coat in no hurry with a rake over her shoulder was the only part of that winter she remembered fondly. They were sitting out of the rain in the tea hut when somebody read out a paragraph from the specification in the voice people use for a document that has ruined their week. Trees were to be assessed against the model specimen, crown, taper, root plate, the lot. That tree lives in a book, Breesha said. It's never had a road put through its roots. Nobody's ever nailed a sign into it. It's never had a lad reverse a chipper into it and then go very quiet. It's never done a Friday, somebody said. It's never done anything, she said. It's beautiful. I'd like to meet it once, and then I'd like it to try working. 6 tired people laughed in a leaking tea hut, which is not nothing at 3 p.m. in February. She went up nothing that week and did the ground and did not complain, and on the Wednesday she stayed behind after the truck went to Guy, a young whip in the verge that was leaning into the road. Nobody was paying for that tree. Nobody owned it. It was going to be flat by March, and she put 2 stakes in it and went home in the dark. They walked the North Road together on the Friday, because he asked her to, and because she had nothing else to do until the bus. Most people would still be talking about Tuesday night, he said. I did talk about it. I talked about it for the whole of Tuesday night. And now, people are going to decide what I am, she said. That part isn't mine. The only bit that's mine is whether I agree with them. He thought about that for the length of 6 trees. Somebody in the yard mentioned, without meaning anything by it, that Corkill never ate before she went up. Not nerves. Weight on a rope and being sick in a tree is a thing you only do once. He never asked her about it. From the following week, there was food in the site cabin at noon, and none at 7, and the noon food was there, whether he was on site or not, and nobody ever said who had arranged it. The clearance company came for the last of the old lock-spec unit on a Tuesday, and got the address wrong twice before they got to the Brandho yard. The driver had a canvas kit bag on his shoulder, and a delivery note he could not make sense of. He stood in the middle of the yard at 8:30 in the morning with the whole crew in earshot and read the label off the bag out loud the way people do when they want somebody else to solve their problem. B. Corkill. Anybody. She came across the yard fast, which she never did. That's mine. Thanks. I'll take it. He did not give it to her. He had turned it round and was reading the tag stitched to the strap. This is a rescue kit, he said. Rope, slings, harness, the lot. Last inspection date on it is 6 years old. He looked up. Whose was it? It's an old bag. Love, nobody buys one of these for themselves. You buy one of these because there are people up trees who expect you to come and get them. He put it down in the mud at her feet because his hands were full and got back in the lorry and drove out and never knew one thing about what he had just done. The crew were looking at her. She picked the bag up by both handles the way you pick up something heavy and put it in the back of her own locker and went out to the chipper. Delvaux had come out of the office door somewhere in the middle of it. He did not ask her a single question about the bag. He watched her feed brash into a chipper for 20 minutes, and then he went inside and sat in front of a screen that told him her national insurance number and nothing else on earth. That night he did the thing he had been avoiding since Tuesday, which was to decide who to ask. Knives to Foley answered it for him, on a lane in front of 9 people before he had asked anybody anything. It was the site meeting on the 10th. The tree officer from the council was there, and Johnson with his laptop bag and the contractor and Delvaux and Breesha at the back with a rake, because the meeting was on her lane, and she had not been told to go anywhere. The tree officer asked whether anyone had reservations about the felling schedule. I do, Breesha said. Toffoli did not turn round. Before we go on, she said, you should all know that the person at the back cost her last employer £90,000. She went up a row of limes. She had been instructed to leave alone on somebody else's land, in a hard hat, with her own firm's name on it. There is a judgment. It is a public document. Anybody can read it in 10 minutes. Silence came down the lane in both directions. Even the rain on the hoods seemed to stop for a second, and then remember itself. Is any of that inaccurate? Toffoli said. No, Breesha said. Then I think we can proceed. The meeting proceeded. Breesha raked the lane. Delvaux said nothing at all in front of any of them, which some of them noticed, and none of them understood. Wanda Labuda found him at the yard gate at 6:30 that evening, with her keys in her hand and her car already unlocked. "You'll be asking somebody," she said. "Ask me and get it right. Go on. 13 years ago I couldn't tie a knot to save myself. I was 23. She taught me. She stayed after work and made me do it in the rain until I stopped being frightened of it, and she never charged the firm for those hours. And the trees. They were sound. Every one of them. She knew it in the morning, and the report said otherwise, and the report was going to be signed on the Friday. Wanda's chin was going, and she carried on anyway. She went up without an authorization, because there wasn't going to be a Monday for them. And the statement, "That's the bit you want, is it?" "Yes." "I gave it," Wanda said. "The firm asked who put the rope in, and I stood in an office with 2 directors, and I said her name, and I was 23, and I have never once been able to make that mean anything except what it is." He waited. "I'm not going to tell you what it did to her," she said. "That's not mine either. Ask her and she won't tell you, and you'll deserve that." She got in the car and did not manage to start it for a while. He read the judgment that night. 3 pages of it. Trespass unauthorized work at height, an insurer withdrawing cover, a firm losing a contract worth £90,000 and passing the costs down. It said nothing whatever about the trees, because the trees were not what was on trial. Then he looked for her. 6 years of her, and there was almost nothing. No employer, no scheme, no ticket, no union, no membership of anything. A woman who had been paid in quantities by companies that did not print her name. She had not gone quiet. She had been kept quiet by a system that has no word for a person who is not anybody's employee, and by one woman with a diary and good intentions, who had spent 2 years keeping her off every list in the county so that nobody would recognize her. She had never once told him any of it, not because she was ashamed of a judgment with her name on it, because she had decided somewhere in the 6 years that anything she was given for a reason other than the work would have to be given back one day with interest. He drove her to the far gate on the Friday, because the lane had flooded and the truck could not get down it. "You've never had the radio on," he said. "No, not once. In 7 weeks. You can't hear a saw start over a radio," she said. "Then you get used to not hearing it. And then you're the person who didn't hear it. You're not on a site now." "No. Do you like anything on it?" "I like the shipping forecast," she said. "I've never been on a boat, and I don't intend to go on one." "Why?" "Because somebody is reading out the weather for people who can't get away from it," she said. And they read it very calmly. And I think that's a kindness. He put his hand out to the dial, changed his mind, and drove the rest of the way to the gate in the quiet. He stood in his own hall that night, with his coat still on, and thought about a woman who liked being told about weather she was never going to be in. The rumor started with a car seat and a plate of sandwiches, and it was not a cruel rumor at all, which was what made it impossible. The crew had watched a black car drop her at the gate on 3 separate mornings. They had watched food arrive at noon. Somebody said it. Somebody else did not disagree. And by the middle of the month, the whole yard had decided that Breesha Corkill was engaged to be married and had been too private to say so. They had a collection. 30 signatures on a card in the tea hut and £53 in an envelope from people on stump rates and 0 hours contracts who had not been asked. They gave it to her on a Thursday at 10:30, with the kettle going. She stood there with the card in her hands and read every name on it. She could have said 1 sentence. She could have said it isn't like that, and the room would have gone red and 30 people would have felt like fools in front of each other, and the woman who had put in a fiver she did not have would have thought about it for a year. "I don't know what to say to you," she said, which was true, and which was not a correction. She put the envelope in her jacket, and she did not correct it that day, or any day afterwards, and she carried that. The kindness got worse over the next fortnight, which is a sentence that only makes sense on a site. People stopped swearing near her. People stopped asking her to take the heavy end. A man on the chipper told her to get in the cab out of the wet and looked hurt when she would not. Somebody moved her name up the rota for the dry jobs and did not tell her they had done it. Nobody said one unkind word to her in 3 weeks, and by the end of it, she could not find out a single thing that was happening on that site, because she had been promoted out of the conversation by people who thought they were being nice to her. She was not isolated. She was upholstered, which is harder to complain about and works just as well. Delvaux was told by the foreman, who thought it was funny. He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He asked what the collection came to, and the following week, a hardship fund appeared with the yard's name on it, and no explanation attached, held by 3 people off the rake, with their own signatures on the mandate matched pound for pound, and nobody from the office ever asked to see to book. Wanda Labuda stopped him by the fuel tank. "You've let it stand." "I have." "So has she." "Yes." "Do you know what happens to her when it comes apart?" Wanda said. "Because it will. Everything does out here." He said that he did. "No, you don't," Wanda said. "You'll be a man who was talked about. She'll be a woman who was found out. Those are not the same weather." She went back to the fuel log and did not look up again, and he stood there a moment longer than he needed to, which was as close as he came all winter to being told off. Toffoli's letter went in on the Monday. It was 3 paragraphs, and it was careful, and it never once used a word anybody could argue with. It raised a concern about the appropriateness of a personal relationship between a director of the group and an unbadged worker on a live site. It requested a review. The review took 8 days, and at the end of it, nobody had done anything to Breesha at all. They stood Wanda down instead. She had put an uninsured woman on a site list in November, which was true, and which she had done to be kind, and which was now a disciplinary matter with a form attached. Breesha found her clearing her locker. "Don't," Wanda said. "I know what you're going to do, and I'm asking you not to." She did not do it. She went out and did the lane instead, and that was the thing that beat her in the end. Not the letter, not the meeting, a locker with a high-visibility coat in it and a woman who would not look up. On the Sunday, she was at Dumitra Nasta's house in Barrow Street. Dumitra was 56 and had broken her arm in June, when a limb came out of a lime on a still day, with no wind in it at all. And the incident report said gale conditions, and Dumitra had signed it because she was on agency and could not read it very fast. She had an old pear tree in a garden the size of a rug. Breesha had been going there on Sundays for 2 years, unpaid, and had taken 30 years of neglect out of that tree by hand. Delvaux drove past because the road went past. He did not stop. He saw a woman on a set of steps in her own coat with her arms up in a pear tree in the low sun, talking to somebody through a kitchen window in no hurry at all. He went to the office. He got nothing done between 2 and 6. "That tree gets a whole Sunday," Wanda said to him on the Monday, in the flat voice of a woman on a written warning. "You get a gate and 11 minutes. She had no idea she was doing him a kindness, and it was the last one she gave him for a month. At 5:10 on the Wednesday morning, Breesha put a rope in the healthy lime at the north end and could not go up it. Nobody was there. That was the point of 5:10. She got the throw line over on the second attempt, set the friction hitch, took hold and put her weight on. Her feet came off the ground by the height of a step. She came back down. She did it again. The same. A third time, and she stood in the wet grass with her hands on the rope and her forehead against the bark, and did not move for a long time. "For 6 years I've looked up at things I could fix," she said out loud to a tree, and told myself the ground was a choice. Nobody answered, because there was nobody in the field, and the crows went over towards the coast the way they did every morning at that time. Then she wiped her face with the back of her wrist, took the slack out of the rope and went up it. She stayed up for an hour. She came down with nothing at all. No cavity, no bracket, fungus, no bleed, no soft wood, a clean, healthy tree with 100 years in front of it, and she stood at the bottom of it and understood exactly what nothing was worth. She did not tell anybody, and she went and got the truck ready, and at 7:30 she was on the rake. Not because the hour in that tree had made her feel better. Because a healthy lime with nothing wrong with it was the only measuring stick anybody in that county had, and she was the only person left who had gone up one to look. The site visit on the 8th was called for 9:30 and there were 8 people on the lane. The tree officer from the council, Johnson, Toffoli, the contractor, 2 from the office, Delvaux, and Breesha, in her own time, on a day she was not being paid, standing at the back of it with a knife on her belt and a bag by her feet. "I've got 30 minutes, the tree officer said. "The felling license is granted. I'm here as a courtesy." "Then let her have the 30 minutes, Delvaux said. "She has no standing here," Toffoli said. "She has a lane and a knife and 30 minutes. Nobody moved. The tree officer looked at his watch and then decided visibly not to look at it again, and the whole group turned round on the wet tarmac and followed a woman in a worn, high-visibility jacket up her own lane. She walked them to number 19 and put her hand on the road side of it. "Everything you've been shown for 6 years has been taken from this side," she said. "The lane side. Now come round." The far side of 19 had ivy on it to shoulder height. She pulled a hank of it away, and there was a plug of wood in the trunk the size of a pencil flush filled over weathered grey. "That's not a wound," she said. "That's a hole somebody drilled and then filled in." She got the knife out and took it out in one piece and held it up. Pale sound and the wrong species entirely. "Dowel," she said. "You can buy it in any yard in the county. It's been in there about 6 years." She walked them up the lane and found the next one in under a minute, and the one after that in under 30 seconds, because by then they all knew what they were looking for. Same side, same height, the height of a standing man's shoulder. Second thing she said, "Root disease travels through the ground. It goes where the roots go, and the roots of these are all in each other's pockets, so it goes outward from a center in a mess, and it never goes in a straight line, because roots don't know what a lane is." She turned round and pointed with the flat of her hand at the row behind them. "These have died along the lane, in order. Down the row, and against the prevailing wind like a man walking with a drill and a flask from that gate to this, one a year, 6 years. And the North Row, Delvaux said. Same soil, same water, same age, planted the same fortnight by the same people. They're in full leaf, and they have never had a single thing wrong with them, and they're the ones with no gate to park a van at." Johnson was looking at his shoes. "Third," she said. 6 years of decay reports. Every one of them says internal decay. There is not one probe hole in any of these trees. Not one. You cannot say what's inside a tree from the outside, so if you say it, you drilled it, and if you drilled it, there's a hole, and there isn't one. Nobody has ever tested these trees. The survey did not happen. The tree officer had stopped writing, and was standing looking down the row. "Last thing," she said. "There are 60 young limes in a holding bed at the back of the Brandhoe yard. They came from Redhaw. They've been there 2 winters. They've still got the nursery tags on them. Go and read the tags. They were ordered before the first tree on this lane was ever called sick." Delvaux spoke once, and it was the only thing he said in the whole of that half hour that was not a question. "You did not report 30 dying trees. You walked up a lane with a drill and a bag of dowel, and then you charged me 6 years to watch them die of it." Toffoli let it go past her. "None of this is evidence," she said. "It is a woman with a knife making holes in a protected tree and telling us she found them. She is not insured to be on this site. She is not insured to be on any site. Her own record is a matter of public judgment. I would be careful what any of you write down." The tree officer said that it was certainly interesting and that he would take it away and look at it properly. Johnson said his firm would be willing to resurvey at its own cost. The contractor said the license still stood and asked whether they were felling in March or not because he had a machine booked. And then they went. All of them up the lane to the gate at 10:20 in the morning, talking about somebody's flight. The felling license was still granted. Nothing on that lane had changed by 1 inch. Breesha stood in the wet grass with a plug of dowel in her hand, and understood that she had been completely right, and that it had made no difference whatsoever. She had expected shouting, She had expected somebody to be removed from something. What she had not expected was lunch. Not because they had not believed her, because believing her would have made work for 8 people and disbelieving her cost nobody anything at all, and there is no form for what she had just done. Delvaux sat on the tailgate of the pickup and did not go after any of them. She sat down on the other end of it. The rain stopped somewhere around noon, and neither of them noticed at the time, and neither of them got up for a long while. "I can file it," he said eventually, "under the group. Your name comes out. There's no reason for you to be anywhere near it." "No. You've read what they'll do with your name. You heard what I said on the barrier. You said nobody left you." "I did say that." She looked up the row, at the gate they had all walked out through. "They left me." He put a line through my name, and 13 people wiped the glass to watch. And I sat down on a barrier and told a stranger it was fine, because that is what I have said about everything for 6 years. "And now, put my name on it," she said. "And put in it that I was left on this site on a Tuesday night, because that's the only reason anybody was standing here today. If my name comes off, then it's a company complaining about its own contractor, and that's a paperwork argument, and paperwork arguments go in a drawer. They will use the judgment. Let them. I did go up that tree. I've never once said I didn't." She turned the dowel over. "And if I'm quiet, they'll do it again, on a lane where nobody's paid by the stump, and there won't be anybody standing in the field at 5:10 wondering what's wrong with the row." That evening, a man from the plant hire firm came to the yard to collect a docket and stood by the driver's door, a fraction longer than the job needed. He had written one line on the back of the docket. It said that Marnock kept its drums in an unalarmed unit off the coast road, that a firm with no chemicals has nothing to sell in March, and that these things happened to units of that kind. He handed it over, face down. Delvaux read it. He took a pen out of his coat and wrote 2 lines underneath and passed it back, and the man read it and put it in his jacket and shook his hand and left. What he had written was that Breesha Corkill's name had been kept off every list in that county for 6 years, and that the first list it went on was not going to be one he had written in the dark. The thing that finished it came from a direction nobody on that lane was watching. Restricted herbicide is a controlled product. Every professional user keeps a register what came off the shelf, what date, what site, who signed for it. The enforcement unit works through the register holders on a rolling program, and it takes years to come round. And it came round to Marnock Arboricultural on a wet Tuesday in March, for reasons that had nothing to do with anybody. 2 years earlier, Neves Toffoli had reported a competitor for exactly this. That complaint had started the file. The file had been sitting in a queue ever since, moving forward at the speed of a queue, and it arrived at her own door on its own schedule and with nobody's permission. The register was in order. That was the problem with it. 30 entries over 6 years. Half a litre at a time, signed out for stump treatment on 30 dates, on which no stumps had been cut anywhere on the group's land, because the group's clearance orders were priced per stump, and every stump on that estate had a number and an invoice attached to it. What the register did not say was where anybody had been. Wanda Labuda's site diaries said where everybody had been. 2 years of them in a cardboard box under a bench in the yard in pencil, because Wanda had been keeping proper diaries since she was 23 and had never once been asked for one. Breesha asked her for them on the Thursday and told her exactly what was in them and what it would do. "There are 2 lads in there getting paid cash," Wanda said. "In my writing. In my box. I know. I'm asking you not to." "I know," Breesha said. "I'm going to anyway, and I wanted you to hear it from me first and not from a man with a lanyard." Wanda looked at her for a long moment and picked up the box and put it on the bench between them and walked out of the yard without another word. The diaries put a Marnock vehicle at the Piper's Lane gate on 28 of the 30 dates. After that, it moved the way these things move when they finally move. The felling license was revoked in 9 days. The consultancy's registration went, and then its insurance, and then its other 3 contracts. Joynson made a statement that ran to 16 pages unprompted on a Sunday, which ended his own career, and which he did not tell one person he had made. Toffoli was removed from the group and then charged, and the charges were about the register rather than about the trees, which is usually how it goes. She said one thing on her way out, and it was not what anybody in that corridor was expecting. "Every scheme in this county needs a tree gone," she said. "Everyone. Nobody wants to say it, and nobody wants to sign it. I signed it. That is the entire service I provided, and all of you bought it, and you bought it with your eyes open." "That is true," Delvaux said, "which means you always knew exactly what it was you were selling. You just did not expect anybody on the rake to be able to read it." He did not say anything else to her, and he never spoke to her again. The yard changed in the way yards do, which is not loudly. The board in the tea hut got a proper roster on it with names and hours. 2 men started leaving at 5, because leaving at 5 had stopped being a thing that got noticed. A lad of 19 asked out loud in front of a foreman why a rule had been written the way it had, and nothing whatsoever happened to him, and everybody clocked it. Delvaux took the hit himself, and did not wait to be asked. The Mereswood scheme died with the license. He wrote off 6 years of consent work, posted the first loss the group had ever posted, and put a 30-year management order over the whole lane in a form that could not be undone by him by anybody who came after him, or by anybody who married anybody. He sent for her on a Friday, and she spent the drive certain she was being finished. The office had a map on the wall and a table, and nothing else worth mentioning. "I want you to run all of it," he said. "Every tree the group owns. 1,100 acres, the town properties, the school leases. You would pick your own people." "No." "Tell me why not." "Because you watched a woman get left on a road in the rain," she said. "And this is you buying her a rope so you can stop thinking about it. I'd rather stay on the stumps than be somebody's apology with a job title." "That's fair," he said. "It's all so wrong, and I'll tell you why once, and then I'll stop. In 6 years, 3 consultancies and 2 contractors have stood on that lane and taken my money. One person on it has ever told me something I did not want to hear. You are not the apology. You are the only survey I have had." She sat down. "Then it's mine," she said, "and on the first day I'm giving away half of it. Half of the budget. Half of the budget goes into the management endowment, and the endowment sits outside the group, with trustees. You can't appoint and I can't appoint because if the money is yours, then, in 10 years, another Toffoli writes another report, and you'll have paid for it again." "Agreed." "And every person on that rake goes on the payroll with a climbing ticket paid for and the time to do it in work hours. Half of them can already do the job. They've just never been allowed to be anybody." "Agreed." "And Wanda Labuda gets her diaries back, and an apology in writing from the group for a disciplinary that should never have had a form near it." "Also agreed." He agreed to all 3 of them inside 2 minutes, and he did not negotiate one line of it, not because he was being generous with her, because every condition she had put on the table was a condition that protected the trees from him, and no one had ever tried to do that before. She put her hand out, and he shook it, and then she took it back, and said that she wanted to earn it. And he said that she had been earning it in the rain since February, and was welcome to keep going if it made her comfortable. The limes came into leaf twice more. There was no ceremony. There was a green sign at the gate with a management order number on it, and a laminated inspection sheet in a box on the gatepost signed by hand, and the name at the bottom of it was hers, and it was printed properly. 30 small-leaved limes, all standing, all with a schedule, none of them with a hole in the road-blind side that nobody had ever gone round to look at. The 60 young limes came out of the holding bed and went into the ground in places they had never been meant for. A school field in Wickstead, a crescent on the estate at Barrow Street, one of them in a garden the size of a rug, where a pear tree had a woman with a broken arm mended, and a new neighbour. Wanda Labuda came back on the payroll and did not speak to her properly for a season, and then one morning put a mug of tea down next to her elbow without a word and walked off. And that was that, dealt with. There was no room and no applause. in any of it. There were 9 people on a rake with climbing tickets in their pockets that the group had paid for and that belonged to them and not to the group. And 2 of them were already better in a tree than the men who had signed the reports. Dumitra Nasta's incident report was reopened and corrected by a woman in an office who had never met her. Still, conditions. No wind. A limb out of a tree that everybody had been told was dying and that had in fact been killed. Dumitra rang the yard about it and was on the phone for 20 minutes and cried and told Breesha afterwards that it was not about the arm, it was that somebody had gone back and put the weather right. Breesha did not change. She was on site before the crew. She was in her own coat, and she went up, in things in a harness that fitted her, which had appeared in the stores one Tuesday, with the tags on, and no delivery note, and no name against the order, and which she had never once thanked anybody for, because nobody had ever admitted to it. He found her at the north end on a Thursday evening, with the tailgate down and a whip in the back of the truck roots wrapped ready for the last gap in the row. "There's a piece of ground at the coast," he said. 60 acres and nothing on it, and no report on it, and nobody wants anything from it. Right. I would like you to come and look at it with me. Not for the group. She did not answer him. She reached into the truck, took the lime out by the stem, the way you carry something you intend to see, grow old, and put it into his arms so that he had to take it with both of them. Then she pushed the spade in with her heel and started opening the ground at his feet. "Hold it straight," she said. "You're coming with me." He held it straight. She squared the hole off and firmed it in with her boot and washed her hands under the water butt. And when she straightened up, he had his hand out the way he had held it, out on a wet barrier on a Tuesday night, with the rain coming sideways, off the field, and she put hers into it, and neither of them was in any particular hurry to get to the truck. There are people who spend a working life being counted rather than named, a quantity on an order, a line on a list somebody else writes. He had not rescued her from that. He stopped a county getting away with it, which is slower and worth more. She was the same woman on the lane she had been on the barrier in the rain, and all that changed was the ground she was allowed to stand on. 30 limes came into leaf that April, and one still had a plug of pale dowel in it that nobody ever filled in.